What did you see on those 4th and 1, those 2 4th and 1s that didn't work? And did you like Kevin having the aggressiveness there, even backed up in your territory?
I mean, first, that's a rude question to ask. If I think, it was a great call by my coach,
Do you like the aggression? Not do you like the call? Like, do you like?
I like being out there playing. so whatever that comes with, it comes with. We're not gonna be here and ever point finger at no coach or do anything like that. Being sticky business.
Well, not that. But
I can't make decisions on the coach and who's coming, who's not. Yeah.
What Bill and Tom, and Kevin all did to help you get.
Yeah, but it's those coaches and also it's other coaches also, that all poured into me and that helped me throughout everything. So definitely, it take a village. It take a village to.
Shedeur Sanders is done playing along. Every single time something happens around the league, certain media members rush to drag his name into it, even when it has nothing to do with him. And this time, the situation went too far in a way that could not be ignored. Kay Cabot didn't just ask a question, she stepped directly into manipulation territory, and Shedeur saw it immediately. The timing alone told you everything you needed to know.
Sticks to see what works, and they're not necessarily doing that with Shedeur right now. With Shedeur, he's on a bit of a different track. He's right now the 4th team quarterback. He's doing great with what he's being asked to do. Everybody's very, very happy with how he's coming along. Everybody's optimistic about what they're seeing with him.
The moment Kevin Stefanski was fired, some people in the media smelled blood in the water. Instead of reporting facts, they started hunting for reactions, angles, and controversy. Cabot saw an opening and tried to put Shedeur Sanders right in the middle of it. Her question wasn't about understanding his mindset or giving him space to speak honestly. It was designed to trap him. She tried to corner Shedeur into an impossible situation. Either praise the new coaching direction and get framed as disrespectful to Stefanski, or defend Stefanski and get labeled as resistant to change. That's the game, and Shedeur wasn't falling for it. Not this time. Instead of biting, Shedeur stopped the whole thing in its tracks. He didn't rush his answer. He didn't get emotional. He didn't give her a soundbite. He called it out for exactly what it was, a setup.
As the 4th team quarterback, and maybe not necessarily someone that they are trying to get ready as fast as possible to start on opening day. Not saying that he can't, because he's being given a chance just like everyone else.
He made it clear in real time that this wasn't a genuine question and that everyone watching could see what was happening. That moment mattered, because most young quarterbacks feel pressured to smile, nod, and play nice with the media no matter how unfair the question is. Shedeur didn't do that. He chose awareness over approval. He chose control over chaos. And that takes confidence, experience, and someone who already understands how fast narratives can turn ugly. This wasn't Shedeur being defensive. This was Shedeur protecting himself. He recognized an attempt to pull words out of him, twist them, strip them of context, and turn them into headlines that would live forever. He basically told her, "You're not asking me anything. You're trying to manufacture drama, and I'm not participating in it." And let's be honest, this didn't come out of nowhere.
I don't care if the team will admit that or not, but this goes on the negative side of the ledger for Shedeur Sanders in terms of winning the quarterback competition.
Kay Cabot has a long track record when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, and it hasn't been fair. When Shedeur was winning games, executing the offense, and showing real growth on the field, there was suddenly silence. No criticism, no breakdowns, nothing. Why? Because there was nothing real to attack. She couldn't go after his play. The tape didn't support it. She couldn't question his work ethic. Coaches and teammates praised it constantly. She couldn't undermine his leadership. The locker room clearly believed in him. So instead of adjusting the narrative, she waited. She waited for a moment of transition. She waited for chaos.
If I'm keeping score right now, this is not a good look for him in the quarterback competition. It's not a good look. And I think it says, okay, let's literally pump the brakes a little bit here and figure out what's going on.
She waited for a coaching change, a firing, anything she could twist into a story. And the second Stefanski was gone, she tried to flip the script and gaslight Shedeur into saying something he'd regret. Maybe the goal was to label him disrespectful. Maybe it was to frame him as political. Maybe it was to paint him as a problem behind the scenes. Whatever the motive was, the playbook was obvious, and Shedeur shut it down immediately. That's the part that people keep missing. He didn't lash out. He didn't insult her. He didn't say anything reckless. He simply exposed the tactic and refused to participate. That's not arrogance, that's maturity. And this isn't an isolated incident either. This is a pattern. From practice reports to minicamp coverage to training camp narratives, Shedeur Sanders has been misrepresented, selectively quoted, and framed unfairly over and over again.
Well, I think right now what everyone needs to realize is the Browns are continuing to bring Shedeur Sanders along. They're not punishing him. They're not stashing him away in some kind of room where nobody can see him. They're not doing wrong by Shedeur Sanders. They're bringing him along at the pace they feel he needs to be brought along at, but they're really excited about what they're seeing in Shedeur. And so they're not going to trade Shedeur away before they know what they have in him. They're excited about what they're seeing. And the thing that they're seeing the most is the thing that they've already known about him, and that is his elite.
This started before he ever took his first professional snap. The difference now? He's not letting it slide anymore. Shedeur Sanders understands the league now. He understands how media games are played, and he understands that protecting your voice is just as important as protecting your body. This wasn't about ego. It was about control, respect, and refusing to be used as someone else's headline. And whether people like it or not, moments like this show exactly why Shedeur Sanders is built differently. Remember when she tried to sell the idea that Dillon Gabriel was somehow better than Shedeur Sanders? That wasn't a slip or an accident. That was a full-blown narrative push. Kay Cabot leaned into that comparison hard, hyping Dillon Gabriel at every possible moment while quietly trying to minimize everything Shedeur was doing on the field. Every article felt calculated. Every mention came with doubt. She questioned whether Shedeur was really the right choice, whether the team rushed the decision, whether Dillon deserved more reps, more trust, more opportunity.
So our glimpse of Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel is over.
It wasn't analysis, it was agenda. She tried to manufacture a quarterback controversy where none existed. She planted seeds of doubt on purpose, hoping fans would bite, hoping decision makers would start second-guessing themselves. This wasn't about competition, it was about creating tension for clicks. And then reality showed up. When Dillon Gabriel failed to live up to the hype, when the comparison completely fell apart on the field, when it became obvious that the gap wasn't even close, the tone suddenly changed. Overnight, the same voice that questioned Shedeur turned around and started praising him. Now Shedeur was a baller. Now he was a natural leader. Now his arm talent, poise, and command of the offense were suddenly undeniable. Funny how fast that switch flipped once the narrative collapsed. She tried to act like she had been riding with Shedeur all along. Like the weeks of doubt never happened. Like she didn't spend real time pushing a storyline that put another quarterback on a pedestal at Shedeur Sanders' expense. That's not growth. That's not accountability. That's flip-flopping. That's someone realizing they backed the wrong horse and quietly switching sides before anyone calls it out. That's not journalism. That's agenda-driven reporting, because real reporting owns mistakes. It explains what changed. It acknowledges being wrong. What she did was pretend the past didn't exist and hope nobody noticed. But here's the part that matters most. The moment another angle appeared, another possible controversy, she went right back to framing Shedeur Sanders again.
Accuracy. He's got a natural feel for the game in that way. So they're excited to see that, and it's probably going to happen at some point this season. I don't know when. Dillon's going to have to find a way to score some points to keep his job. But at some point, Shedeur is going to get a chance to go out there and show off that elite accuracy and do what he can do with this offense. But once again, I don't think it's going to be easy for anybody throwing passes to this young and sort of inexperienced group right now.
Same playbook, different chapter. Find an angle, twist the narrative, create tension, generate clicks. And if Shedeur Sanders ends up catching the fallout, so be it. That's the pattern. And let's not forget the speeding ticket incident, because that one really exposed the mindset. When Shedeur Sanders got a simple traffic ticket, Kay Cabot treated it like front-page breaking news. Not a minor mistake. A full character indictment. She tried to push the idea that he was irresponsible, reckless, and somehow unfit to represent the organization. A speeding ticket. Let that sink in. Professional athletes are human beings. They drive cars. They make mistakes. They get traffic tickets just like millions of people do every single year. but the way she framed it, you would have thought it was a serious scandal. She wrote with dramatic weight, questioning his maturity, his discipline, his respect for rules, all over a traffic violation. She didn't contextualize it. She didn't downplay it. She didn't treat it like what it was, a minor infraction. Instead, she used it as an excuse to question whether Shedeur Sanders even belonged. She questioned his professionalism. She questioned his judgment. She questioned whether the organization should be concerned about his off-field behavior, all because of a speeding ticket. The overreaction wasn't accidental. It served a purpose. When there was nothing to criticize on the field, nothing to attack in practice, nothing to question about leadership or preparation, this gave her something negative to write. It gave her a hook, and that's the problem. When performance doesn't support the narrative, some people go hunting for anything else they can twist. And Shedeur Sanders has had to deal with that from day one. At the time, Shedeur Sanders took the high road. He stayed quiet. He didn't fire off responses on social media. He didn't clap back through interviews or leak frustration behind the scenes. He didn't engage with the articles that clearly carried a slant. Instead, he did what professionals do. He let his play speak for him. He locked in on football. He focused on growth, preparation, and being the best teammate he could possibly be. While narratives swirled and questions popped up, Shedeur kept showing up, kept competing, kept leading. That restraint showed maturity well beyond his age, and it earned him respect inside the locker room. But here's the reality. Silence only works for so long. There comes a moment when staying quiet stops looking like maturity and starts being interpreted as agreement. There comes a moment when ignoring misrepresentation allows it to spread unchecked. And Shedeur Sanders clearly reached that moment. Enough was enough. He had taken the manipulation. He had endured the agenda-driven framing. He had watched story after story subtly paint him as the problem. And eventually, you reach a point where protecting your name becomes more important than keeping the peace. That press conference was that moment. Shedeur didn't just respond, he clarified. He slowed the situation down and exposed exactly what was happening in real time. He made it clear that the question wasn't designed for honesty or understanding. It was designed to provoke something controversial, something that could be clipped, twisted, and turned into a headline. And instead of walking into that trap, he flipped the entire dynamic. He didn't answer and move on. He addressed the approach itself. He called attention to the tactic being used. That's not something you see often, especially from a young quarterback under a microscope. That's awareness. That's growth. That's someone who understands how media narratives are built. Shedeur Sanders has been around this long enough to know how the game works. He's seen players get misquoted. He's seen comments taken out of context. He's watched careers take hits because someone chased a headline instead of the truth. And he decided he wasn't going to be next. That moment wasn't emotional. It wasn't reckless. It was calculated and controlled. He chose clarity over chaos. He chose transparency over silence. And that's a power move. Because when you call out bad faith questioning in public, you change the rules. You force accountability into the room. You make everyone listening pay closer attention. And doing it in front of cameras, other reporters, and a full press room sends a message that can't be ignored. It tells everyone that Shedeur Sanders is no longer an easy target. It tells them that vague framing and loaded questions won't slide anymore. It tells them that if someone tries to manufacture controversy at his expense, it will be exposed immediately. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. This is someone who has learned from experience and decided he's done being passive about his own reputation. He understands that once a narrative sticks, it's hard to shake. And he understands that sometimes you have to draw a line publicly. The consistency of what led to this moment matters. This didn't happen once. This didn't happen twice. The pattern has been there, and that's why it finally got addressed. When every opportunity to twist a moment gets taken, when every transition becomes a chance to reframe the same player negatively, people start noticing. And Shedeur noticed long before he spoke up. One time might be coincidence. 2 times might be aggressive reporting. But when it keeps happening, when the tone stays the same no matter the circumstances, the intent becomes harder to ignore. Shedeur Sanders didn't attack. He didn't accuse. He didn't escalate. He simply exposed the approach and refused to play along. And that's the part that matters most. He protected his name. He protected his work. He protected everything he's built. And he did it calmly, clearly, and in full view of everyone watching. But when the same thing happens again and again and again, when there's there's a clear and undeniable pattern of targeting one specific player while others are given grace, benefit of the doubt, or silence, it stops being subtle. At that point, it becomes impossible to ignore what's really going on. This isn't coincidence anymore. It's intent. The coaching change exposed everything. Kevin Stefanski, only getting fired had nothing to do with Shedeur Sanders personally. It wasn't about his preparation. It wasn't about his attitude. It wasn't about his performance. It was an organizational decision tied to wins, losses, direction, and long-term vision. Shedeur was just another player on the roster doing his job, preparing every week, competing, and trying to win games. Yet somehow, Kay Cabot immediately looked at that moment and thought, how can I turn this into something about Shedeur Sanders? Not how can I explain the decision? Not how can I analyze the front office logic? Not how can I report responsibly? Instead, the thought was, how can I bait him into controversy? How can I frame a question that puts him in a no-win situation? How can I pull a quote that can be twisted, clipped, and turned into a headline that lives longer than the truth? That's not journalism. That's a setup. That's someone waiting for an excuse to activate an agenda. And Shedeur saw it coming from a mile away. Why? Because this wasn't his first time dealing with it. He's watched the patterns. He's experienced the framing. He's seen how moments get manipulated when his name is involved. He knows the tactics. He knows how questions are constructed. He knows how narratives are shaped before the answer is even given. And this time he wasn't interested in playing along. That awareness is earned. You don't get that from one bad interaction. You get that from repeated experiences where the same person shows you exactly how they operate. So when the question came, Shedeur didn't hesitate. He recognized the play immediately and shut it down before it could turn into something ugly. That's growth. That's control. That's someone who refuses to be used as a prop in someone else's storyline. And let this be clear, this wasn't disrespectful. This wasn't emotional. This was direct, calm, and intentional. He protected himself without crossing any lines. So let this moment be a message, not just to Kay Cabot, but to anyone else who thinks they can run the same playbook. Shedeur Sanders is not an easy target anymore. He's not going to sit quietly while false narratives circulate. He's not going to let loaded questions slide. And he's not going to allow agenda-driven reporting to define who he is. If manipulation shows up, he's calling it out. If bad faith journalism shows up, he's exposing it. And if someone thinks they can bait him into controversy, they're going to get shut down publicly. Those days are over. The days of pushing misleading narratives without consequence are done. The days of trying to twist his words for clicks are finished. The days of assuming silence equals weakness are gone. Shedeur Sanders has drawn a clear line in the sand. He's protecting his name. He's protecting his work. And he's taking control of his own narrative. And honestly, that's exactly what needed to happen.